In today's video, we're reviewing the latest NHL trade rumors, focusing on the Boston Bruins and possibly trading their rights to pending free agent Torrey Krug. We have some updates on the Carolina Hurricanes and moves they may be making. Plus, could we see the Montreal Canadiens make a blockbuster move to try to acquire Winnipeg Jets forward Patrik Laine? Plus, could Dustin Byfuglien return? We have the latest updates on him as well, and it's all coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now today we have a variety of news, rumors, and updates here around the NHL. So let's dive right in and get started. Longtime NHL player Chris Stewart has officially announced his NHL retirement. Now Stewart last made an appearance earlier this year briefly with the Philadelphia Flyers. He's been basically bounced around the NHL quite a bit. Ended up playing 668 NHL games with a variety of teams like Colorado, St. Louis, Minnesota, Calgary, Philly, and a few others as well. Bit of a journeyman, but certainly had a decent career, especially for a guy who did not even get drafted into junior when he was a first draft eligible in the OHL in Ontario. Didn't get drafted, had to fight for everything he did. So along the same thing with his brother Anthony, who now works for Hockey Night in Canada. They certainly are what the definition is of perseverance and dedication, and he had a pretty solid career given what he had here. So congrats to Chris Stewart on a pretty solid career. Now, of course, as we know as well, it's NHL buyout season right now. The window for buyouts opened up already here, and will go to October the 8th. Right now, we've only seen one so far, and that was the Senators buyout of Bobby Ryan that we talked about before. Now, we do have word that the San Jose Sharks will not be doing any buyouts. There was some people wondering maybe that they would consider buying out goalie Martin Jones, but there's just too much term. It's too expensive for them to consider that. So it looks as though they plan to let Aaron Dell hit free agency, and then at the same time bring in another goalie to work with Jones. Their goaltending tandem is likely going to have to be a little bit more expensive because of it, but it's just a little too expensive yet to consider that. So Jones is definitely going to be back, and the Sharks won't be buying anybody out now. Of course, with the trade we saw last night with the Red Wings and the Rangers, with Mark Stahl being shipped from the Rangers to the Red Wings, we also got word in that press conference from the Red Wings GM Steve Yzerman that defensemen Jonathan Ericsson and Trevor Daley will not be brought back, which is really not a big surprise. We kind of figured that already, but he did confirm that in that news conference and basically indicated that Mark Stahl was there to kind of plug a hole, bring in some veteran leadership as well. I know I talked about in the trade video that I wondered if maybe they were acquiring him just for the purpose of buying him out, but that doesn't appear to be the case. Looks as though he is going to be a Red Wing. He is going to play, and they want him back there on that blue line as a veteran presence to kind of fill one of the spots left by the other veterans like Ericsson and Daley, who are not going to be brought back. They don't have a lot of defense on their contract right now, and the ones they do, there's a few that don't have a ton of experience, so certainly goes along with how Yzerman also signed forward Sam Gagner the other day as well. He needs some veterans there to kind of fill some holes on a short-term basis while they keep developing some of their younger players. Now, will Dustin Byfuglien make his triumphant return to the NHL? There was some talk about this on the latest edition of Saturday Headlines on Hockey Night in Canada with Elliot Friedman and Chris Johnston. And based on what Friedman said, it seems really, really unlikely that he'll ever come back and play. Apparently, the Minnesota Wild had reached out to the Byfuglien camp to see if there was interest. They thought maybe where he's from, Minnesota, he would be interested in coming there on a shorter term contract. Thought maybe they could get him probably for like a league minimum deal or something to that effect. But it looks as though he probably won't even want to play. Friedman did get a comment from Byfuglien's agent who confirmed that and said it was really unlikely. But there was other teams that had been rumored to kind of been waiting to find out about Byfuglien's potential return as well, because they were very interested. I mean, considering how big and strong he is and how he plays, he's obviously not as quick as he used to be. He's the type of player, though, who could certainly help a lot of franchises. It's kind of a shame in a way he won't continue playing, but obviously that's entirely up to him, and it looks as though he might be heading into retirement. Now, there's also reports today that the Boston Bruins very well could be trading the signing rights of pending UFA defenseman Torrey Krug here very shortly. Look, that's something that could happen here relatively quick in the coming days, because we're not that far from free agency getting underway. And right now it's looking more and more likely that Krug will not be re-signing with the Bruins. So it only makes sense that they could trade his rights to try to get something in return. It seems like a bit of a trend we're seeing more of lately, that we likely will see more this year. We've seen it a bit in the past, but obviously teams want to be able to recoup, even if it's only a mid-round draft pick, it's something rather than lose the player for nothing. So obviously I don't think there's going to be any shortage of interest in a player like Krug. I mean, there was a lot of reports previously about the Habs being interested, but I don't see that being a fit anymore, given the fact they've already addressed their blue line needs, already acquired Joel Edmondson. Different kind of player, but still, I don't see with the other moves they've made that really makes sense any longer. Certainly look to a team like Winnipeg, who's got a lot of holes on the blue line. They could be of interest. I know there's a lot of speculation and talk about his hometown Detroit Red Wings being very interested as well. As we just discussed, they certainly have a lot of holes in their blue line. And it's really going to boil down to what Torrey Krug wants. Is he more interested in just getting the most amount of money he can possibly get? Or does he want to find a combination of a good paycheck and a good chance to win? I don't know what's most important to him. And obviously a lot of that's going to determine where he goes. The Red Wings can certainly offer him a nice hefty raise over what he's been earning in Boston, but they're a long ways from winning, and he'd have to, be willing to be part of that rebuild and be, at least a number of years here before they're likely even contending for the playoffs. So difficult to say what happens with Krug, but there's several reports out there indicating that his rights are being discussed as a trade option now, and it could be something that happens here within the next couple of days, so we'll have to stay tuned for that. But like I said, there won't be any shortage of interest. Lots of other teams out there as well that would be interested in bringing the offensive blue liner. He's been a big part of Boston offense from the back end, and that's going to be a big loss for them. I know there was some talk about the Bruins maybe even trading Brandon Carlo before as well. There's been, of course, you factor that in with Chara getting older. No guarantee yet he comes back, but it sounds like he wants to. So assuming the Bruins want to bring him back, he should, but still, he won't be there for too much longer. So really, I can't imagine if Krug leaves that they would look at trading a guy like Carlo or McAvoy into the other younger solid D. That just wouldn't make any sense. But look out for a Krug trade possibly coming real soon. Now, as I mentioned as well, we should be expecting to see some shakeup here in the Carolina Hurricanes. Of course, they've made the playoffs the past couple of years, but this year was a bit of a disappointment. They certainly exited the playoffs earlier than expected, and there is a few moves that they're certainly looking to make here to get better, to get back at it for next year. For starters, in goal, they're another team that's definitely going to be joining this goaltending carousel that we've been talking about. Goaltender James Reimer is another guy who's certainly on the market for trade. He's a guy who has a very low salary. It's under $1 million, but he's owed in actual dollars. His cap hit isn't too bad. And he's been around a long time. Certainly had his fair share of injury issues as well, but for that kind of price, I can't imagine there would be a shortage of interest. There'd be a lot of teams probably interested, would fit the budget for a backup goaltender. So I do expect him to go. There is a possibility Mrazek could move too, but I would think it's less likely. I would think that more likely what happens is they find a new home for Reimer and bring in somebody else might be comparable to Mrazek when it comes to contract and have a 1A, 1B situation. At least that would be my guess on what they do. They're also preparing here for life without Justin Williams, but the door is still open for him to come back. No clear-cut answer on if he returns or not, and they probably won't have that for some time. I mean, you never know unless he fully decides he doesn't want to come back and is going to retire. Maybe we get some kind of an announcement sooner than later, but at this point we're not expecting one because we don't know how that's going to go. So they have to prepare to be on the move without him here. But like I said, at the same time, leave the door open for a return. But I also think that there's a good possibility. We've had numerous reports here over the last while that they could still move another defenseman. Even though they traded Joel Edmondson, if you look at their blue line, they still have an abundance of blue liners. They still have some really solid guys like Jacob Slavin, Dougie Hamilton, Brett Pesce, Jake Gardner back there. You still got Hayden Fleury, Jake Bean. Jake Bean's a guy who's been in the AHL way too long, in my opinion. He is ready for an opportunity, and they either need to trade him so he can play somewhere else or get him in your lineup and move out somebody else to take the role. The main names that we had heard before that possibly being moved would be either Shea or Gardner, but it's hard to say exactly what they do. I mean, Gardner's stock would be low right now, so they wouldn't get much of a return. He didn't have a great debut in first season in Carolina. They also have, Sammy Vatanen, who's a UFA, unlikely to return in Carolina. And same thing with Trevor Van Riemsdyk, who's, I can't say he won't be back, but if they sign him, then they're still going to have way too many. So it just creates the more likelihood of a trade here. Like I said, and they need to either trade Jake Bean or get him in the lineup because I think he's certainly earned his opportunity. Now, lastly here, I want to take a look at an article from the Montreal Gazette talking about a potential blockbuster package and how the Habs could acquire Patrik Laine from the Winnipeg Jets. Now, we've talked a lot about Laine over the past week. The rumor mill's been full of talk around this player, getting tons of interest. There was more talk about him on Saturday headlines as well from Elliot Friedman, talking about how this all came to be. Obviously, like I said before, it boils down to the fact that the Jets, if they extend him in a year's time, they're going to have a lot of money tied up in their forward group. They still have some big holes in the number 2 center spot and on the blue line that they need to address, and they may not really be able to afford to do that while giving him a massive contract, which at the same time, though, you need a guy that can put the puck in the net. So it's kind of a tough decision here, and there's no guarantee that he gets traded, obviously, but there's also some wondering if he really wants to be in Winnipeg long term. He wants to play on Mark Scheifele's line, and it just doesn't seem like Winnipeg, for whatever reason, wants to put him there. Obviously, Scheifele and Wheeler play extremely well together. So I don't know. I don't think there's any guarantee this happens, but obviously there's been a lot of teams that have been rumored to be in the mix. And the last we had heard, Montreal wasn't really pushing super hard, but had some interest in this player. But the Pat Hickey from the Montreal Gazette put out an article here in the past couple of days talking about what he felt would be a blockbuster package to help make them get this acquisition done. Now, I want this is only for discussion purposes only. This isn't really a rumor saying they're having these talks. This is just their opinion on this potential trade, and I want to see what you think, especially if you're a Montreal fan. So the package basically went as follows. He recommended putting in Max Domi, given the fact he could be the Winnipeg Jets' number 2 center. Obviously, we know Domi wasn't real pleased with his usage, his playing time, how he's being used. I mean, I know his agent recently put out comments as well saying that Max wants to stay in Montreal, and I fully expect that. I'm not really saying that he's definitely going to get traded, but at the same time, he would certainly fill that need. Of course, his father, Ty, played for Winnipeg before too, so there's some roots there from that from years back. Also included in this deal would be a couple of defensemen, likely Brett Kulak, and possibly one of the younger defensemen like a Cale Fleury or a Noah Juleson. So you're looking at 3 pieces with Domi, Kulak, and one of those other young D. And if that's not enough, Hickey recommended throwing in the 2020 first-round pick, which is number 16 overall, citing the fact that really when Montreal's picking outside of the top 10, they haven't had great success converting those into being big-time players, and then maybe they should take a chance here to bring in a sniper like Laine, who is a proven commodity, who can be a big-time goal scorer. So that would be quite a haul for Winnipeg. I mean, you have the number 2 center, you have a couple of defensemen who can fill some holes in your blue line, and they're still young enough that could be there for an extended period of time. And then you have another first-round selection, a number 16 overall, where you could get yourself a really solid prospect in a deep draft. I would personally have to think that out of all the trade suggestions and rumors that we've talked about around Laine in the last week, that's one of the better ones. Like we talked about Laine in the past couple of days where we went through an article from the Hockey News talking about 5 potential trades for Laine. And even though Montreal was kind of a team that was kind of suggested to be kind of out of the running and not really, showing a ton of interest, I still think they have the best package for what they can offer Winnipeg, as I mentioned in another video as well. So this is not coming at a huge surprise to me that Montreal media is suggesting this. Obviously, it's far from a guarantee that it happens, but it's a very interesting thought, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Obviously, there's lots of other teams that would be interested in Laine, but when you look at what the Jets really need in return, I just think Montreal is the best suited to satisfy it, to get the deal done. These two teams have made trades before, so there's history there as well. I just think it's a great match. But, again, no guarantee either of these players move when it comes to Domi or Laine, but it's a fun thing to think about. Certainly, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.